Hey, everybody. Welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy.
On day one, my administration will terminate every open border policy of the Biden administration. We begin the largest domestic deportation operation in American history.
I will run the biggest deportation operation this country's ever seen.
America is for Americans and Americans only. They're poisoning the blood of our country. Getting them out will be a bloody story. If you come back, you will be executed. You will be killed immediately. Not going to be easy, but we'll do it.
Is there a way to carry out mass deportation without separating families?
Of course there is. Families can be deported together.
Well, this is where we are, kids. That was Donald Trump, obviously, and his gaggle of sycophants, and Tom Homan, the new border czar. And where we're at is mass deportations, executions, and deporting U.S. citizens. We got a great show for you today. Rick Wilson is back in the back room. Don't forget to stick around later for another episode of Just Jeff. But first, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please rate and review and follow or subscribe, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. So let's start off with these crazy cabinet nominations that Donald Trump has been firing off. It's been a barrage this week. Started off kind of semi-normal with Marco Rubio, conventional U.S. senator. He's on the Foreign Relations Committee, putting aside whether you like him or his positions. He's not a crazy nomination, but then it took a turn with Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense, Tulsi Gabbard to be the Director of National Intelligence, Bobby Kennedy Jr., Director of Health and Human Services, and then the piece de resistance, Matt Gaetz, Attorney General. And, I was thinking about this last night. It's pretty stunning, I got to say, the amount of people in this new administration that have been adjudicated for sexual assault, accused of sexual assault, investigated for sexual crimes, and or involved in major sex scandals. This, my friends, is the party of faith and family values.
I thought that was a pre-qualification.
It's on the list, Matty. So what do you guys think of all this?
Well, even though we knew it was coming because he said this is what he was going to do, and we read about Project 2025, I have to say that I feel like I'm getting punched in the stomach repeatedly, and then I'm like sucker punched, and it's really hard to have the will to even have a sense of humor about it because it's just so terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
I think we did actually months ago make sort of goofy predictions of who he would put in charge if he won the election. And I feel like even except for RFK Jr., which we assumed would be Health and Human Services, Matt Gaetz was never on my bingo card for any position.
No.
And a disappointing thing happened today. The Ethics Committee was supposed to meet,
Right.
and they did not, which tells us...
Well, they were going to vote on their report,
and
on
they
Matt
canceled
Gaetz.
it.
And that's really... it's the reason why he resigned, because once he resigns, they have no jurisdiction over him anymore with this kind of stuff.
But they have the right to release it, but now they've canceled the meeting to vote to release it.
Right, but the talk is that someone's going to leak that sucker. And from a either legal standpoint or procedural standpoint, the expectation is that if there are Senate confirmation hearings, that the Senate has a right to access and review that report.
Sure, that's going to matter.
And it's due diligence, yeah.
So Susan Collins is going to be horrified and so disappointed in his behavior. Nobody cares.
Should I do my Susan Collins
Please.
impression? So I find it very shocking what he has been accused of, and I'm aghast that he was nominated, and I'm just besides myself and outraged, and I will vote for him.
I think that was good, except it was a little bit of a Yiddish version of
I'm a Jew. I'm a Jew, Matty. There's Yiddish in everything. It's in my blood.
Fair enough.
It's like he's casting the fucking Lord of the Flies movie, right? But the expectation, like you said, is that he was going to put a bunch of clowns in these cabinet positions. So who they are, it doesn't really matter. The bigger issue is we're staring down the barrel of a constitutional crisis. Will Congress completely abdicate its constitutional responsibility, its power of advice and consent, and just lay down and let Trump do whatever the fuck he wants, either by confirming all of his nominations or just going bye-bye for a while and letting him make recess appointments? And then we have no democracy left.
There's a little teeny tiny piece of me that thinks that if the Republicans just lay down in the Senate completely, then this is all that they've been bred to do.
Right. Well,
So how is it possible they're going to just roll over so fast?
it would be like an act of self-castration, rendering themselves powerless, right? I mean, what would be the point of that other than to just operate as they have been for the last 9 years in absolute total fear of Donald Trump and subjugating themselves to the point where there's no point to having a Congress anymore? I expect these people to just completely do what they've done the last 9 years. He says jump, these motherfuckers say how high.
I don't actually know what they're going to do because I agree with you. I don't think there's any expectation that they're going to have a backbone or do anything other than abdicate all their responsibility. And so it would not shock me if they decide to leave for 10 days and say we're in recess, which gives him the right to basically appoint a dog as the defense secretary.
But that dog would only have a year, Matty.
That's it. That's true. Good point.
And then they'd have to find another dog.
Yes.
You know he loves actings, right? Remember when he said that? I love acting. I love doing actings. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, because this is it, folks. We've been saying for how long democracy is facing an existential threat. This is it.
Good.
This is it.
Bring it. Bring it. This is what people voted for. Bring on the fucking crazy. Blow it up. And let's see how people feel in a year and a half.
Well, that's my theory, Jen.
It is?
It is, Jen. My theory is that the administration is going to be so full of incompetent, chaotic people, nobody knowing what they're doing. Couple that with defections and resignations at all of the major agencies. I mean, if you're a scientist, you want to work for Body? If you're in the Pentagon, you want to work for Mr. Weekend Fox guy? If you're in the intelligence community, you want to work for Tulsi Gabbard? If you're at the DOJ, these fine, patriotic men and women who selflessly serve this country, who go out there and risk their lives every day, no matter who's in the White House, you think they want to work for Matt fucking Gaetz? So I think the only thing we can hope for is that they are just so chaotic that they can't get anything done. And on paper, that's not a terribly improbable scenario. That's our only hope.
I think the big danger is national security. When you have a DOJ not only run by Matt Gaetz, but his personal lawyer, Todd Blanche, is going to run the day-to-day activities of the DOJ. And he's stocking all of the DOJ senior positions with his personal attorneys. And you take the intelligence agencies, and you take everything that, take Health and Human Services. God forbid we have another pandemic or there's some sort of biological warfare, because it'll be completely drained of any scientific talent, which is horrible on one level, but it's catastrophic when you have a national security crisis.
As you mentioned, if your counterterrorism is investigating the enemies from within and not the typical enemies, like obviously Iran and Russia and China are not your top priority. Sure. That was the first time I couldn't breathe, was that realization.
The FBI only has 10,000 agents. If suddenly 50% of them are investigating, Liz Cheney and the January 6th committee and every other crazy fucking thing that he has, that just takes them off of what they should be doing.
Absolutely. We also are in a position where now we have to worry about our allies overseas not giving us top secret intel because they're afraid that Tulsi Gabbard's going to send it off to Putin or Assad in Syria. Health and Human Services. I mean, God help us. I'm an atheist, but I'm thinking of believing in God just so that I could pray to her that we never have another pandemic. Imagine another pandemic where instead of Fauci, you got Bobby the K.
Bobby the K.
It's terrifying.
But at least we'll have a strong Israel that can do whatever it wants, whenever it wants.
I don't know if we're going to have that. Just because this administration will be supporting Israel doesn't mean it's going to be policies that are going to be good not only for Israel but for us. So,
all right, we could take a bet on that one if you'd like.
I think the giving Netanyahu free will to do whatever he wants is not good for Israel's future.
yeah, all I'm saying is the jury is out on
Everything.
everything. But I am hopeful that people start to get buyer's remorse quickly. We're seeing that in Michigan with Arab Americans. I think we're going to start seeing that soon with the Latino community. Women are going to have buyer's remorse. Young men, I think you're going to have buyer's remorse too. And so what we have to focus on right now is the midterm elections are 2 years away. 2 years. And we're going to have an opportunity, hopefully, to flip Congress back to Democrats.
Yeah, I think that we have 18 months roughly to look forward to of catastrophic anything goes, because he's going to have free reign to do that for that roughly that period.
But you
of
know
time.
how slow politics moves.
He's learned from his last time at the
I agree
helm
with you.
to move a little faster. Is what I'm
I
saying.
just think from a procedural standpoint, I don't believe there's so much that can be done in a very short amount of time to really shape shift this country. I think they're going to try. Some of those things, to your point, will happen, certain executive orders, but things will be challenged. Things are going to go to court. And even if I threw in the towel and said, ultimately, we're going to lose on those lawsuits. But shit doesn't move through the court system quickly. We've seen that. So
but that plays in his favor more than ours, because it gets challenged by the right side, and in the meantime, it'll stay in place in a lot of cases.
No, it could be injunctions that are slapped on this shit. You got to stop doing this until blah, blah, blah. Like, we saw that before.
What if there's one other silver lining? What if it's just the battle of the egos?
Well, that's definitely going to happen.
That's definitely going
Right.
to
So
happen.
if that's going to happen, then everyone has to get on the same page. And okay, so I think things are going to go really quickly through the courts, but what will go quickly through the courts? Whose voice is going to be the loudest, and how is that going to work? Is it going to be Steve Miller? Is it going to be Elon Musk? Is it going to...
We don't know what the issue is. Like, it could be...
Well, we know it's going to be a bunch of them, but which one do you pick first?
It's not... well, I don't know if it's about any individuals. It's going to be some kind of policy will be attempted to be implemented, and then there will be, whether it's the ACLU or some other body or some other injured party, is going to file a lawsuit, and then there'll be a counter motion, and then it will drag through the courts. So I don't think it's as easy as it seems, especially with these people. Your point about ego, how long will the Trump-Musk bromance last? How long will the Trump-RFK bromance last? How long will all of these people who need to act together as a unified political machine, how long before the egos start taking over? And we already know who Trump is. He said it last night. Bobby's popular, but don't get too popular, Bobby. Like, what does that mean? He's telling Bobby, don't go too rogue.
Not only that, but
I get the attention.
And don't take away my junk food.
Well, that's never going to happen, because
I want him to go wild on the health, but except stay the fuck out of McDonald's.
Exactly.
the only good ideas that he's put forward are like getting rid of junk food in school cafeterias, which he doesn't fully have jurisdiction over. But even so, if he tried to do that, it would never go forward.
I think Bobby's a loose cannon, and there ain't anybody can tell Bobby what to do at the end of the day.
So much power he's been given.
And Musk, you think Musk's going to be like, yeah, boss?
I predict that Musk will suck up to Trump, but what we're already hearing is that people are annoyed by him.
Of course.
He's hanging out at Mar-a-Lago and won't leave the
I like this guy. He's hanging out. I can't get rid of him. I can't get rid of him. He's going to get rid of him soon enough, whether it's a week from now, a month from now, 8 months from now, a year from now. These two titanic egos cannot exist in harmony. It's just not going to happen. That I will bank on. I will bet anything on.
I'm conflicted, because of course you're right about the egos, but there's one thing Donald Trump wants and Elon Musk has, and that's enormous sums of money. And where I see this going is Musk could just say, oh, I think that X should buy Truth Social and you should be valued at $50 billion.
Sure, that could totally happen. That doesn't, but that wouldn't stop
that'll
Trump.
buy Trump some
Trump is still
love.
a sociopath, and
Well,
so he is predictable. There's a reason why virtually no one he surrounded himself with from his first administration that had even a shred of credibility is supporting him now, or supported him in the election.
Well, to your point, this thing that's supposedly going to be created with him and Vivek probably will never happen, or if it does, it'll get nowhere. Congress isn't going to cut anything in the budget. They're not going to give up anything. He's talking about getting rid of $2 trillion. He'll be lucky to get rid of $2.
Yeah, look, talk is cheap. And let's not forget, he was president once before. He has a record. We can look at what he actually accomplished during those 4 years. And it wasn't much. When you take away tax cuts for the rich, name something.
Agreed.
There's nothing there. I'm not a gambling man, so I wouldn't bet on any of this shit. But it is not an improbable scenario that this clown show is going to do anything but conduct a circus, like clowns do. All right, let's get to our winners and losers.
My winner, Sean Baker's movie Honora, because for 2+ hours, it was an engaging twist on the Cinderella story, and I didn't think about the election results. My loser, the loophole of the recess appointment clause, paired with control of the Senate, would or could allow Trump to appoint anyone to his cabinet.
My winner is Ben Collins. In kind of an incredible moment of karmic justice, Collins, who is the CEO of The Onion, has purchased Alex Jones's InfoWars along with its inventory of supplements. My loser is, at least last count, 334.9 million residents of the United States, whether you voted for Trump or against him.
My winner, The Onion, which won the auction to acquire conspiracy theorist Alex Jones's InfoWars, including its website, customer lists and inventory, certain social media accounts, and the production equipment used to put Jones on the air. My loser, RFK Jr., who just 5 months ago posted a scathing condemnation of Trump on everything from scamming American workers to his mismanagement of COVID. And he ended his post with, quote, "If you think a second Trump term would be any different, you are engaged in wishful thinking." That gets us to the rant. Bear with me, folks. This might be a little long. If you're not into my long rants, this would be a great time to go to the bathroom. So before 11.5 BA, and for those of you who don't know what that means, that's BA stands for Before Autocracy, I was known here in the back room as Optimistic Andy. Well, that naive fucker's left the building, and Pessimistic Andy is now in charge. Because my sad new reality is I've lost all faith in the system. I've lost all faith in our institutions. I've lost all faith in Congress, in the Supreme Court, with Democrats, with the Republican Party, with the media, and with the electorate. Because I went from expecting the best and preparing for the worst to now expecting the worst from everything and everyone and hoping for something just shy of that. I will never again apply logic and rational thought to my opinions and expectations when it comes to Donald Trump, Republicans, the Supreme Court, and my fellow Americans. I no longer believe the best in people. I now, unfortunately, expect the worst in them. I'll never again hear myself say foolish things such as, he'll do the right thing, she'll do the right thing, they'll do the right thing, or Trump won't do that because it'll really hurt him, or if he does that, there'll be serious pushback and consequences, or no one is above the law. Because for the past 9 years, we've watched Trump do or say whatever the fuck he wants, legal or illegal, moral or immoral, ethical or ethically bankrupt, while his cowardly sycophants in Congress and the courts rolled out the red carpet for him. In fact, the worse he is, the more outrageously offensive he is, the more dangerous he is, the more corrupt he is, the more popular and successful he actually becomes. So these next 4 years, I'm expecting the absolute worst from Trump. I'm expecting shameless, pathetic, cowardly fealty from the Republican-controlled Congress. I am expecting constitutional malpractice from the Supreme Court. I'm expecting a completely neutered, fearful media. And I have serious concerns that even if Trump's performance in his next term is utterly dreadful, that his mastery at gaslighting and lying will convince the cultists, even 3 years from now, that it's all Joe Biden's fault and Kamala Harris's fault. And guess what? That they will believe him. Because we truly have entered the Twilight Zone meets The Handmaid's Tale meets The Apprentice meets The Walking Dead. It's an alternate universe where truth and reality can no longer be counted on, especially in upholding the rule of law and holding our elected leaders accountable. I am expecting the Senate to confirm every single one of Trump's cabinet appointments, no matter how incompetent, corrupt, and dangerous they may be. I'm also expecting them to grant him the power to make recess appointments, despite such a move collectively snipping off their own balls while subjugating themselves to the king. I'm expecting Donald Trump to carry out every one of his threats of vengeance against his opponents and perceived enemies, especially against those who've merely exercised their right of free speech against this self-proclaimed protector of free speech. I'm expecting an unconscionable assault on our nation's immigrants, and this includes mass deportations, including those of U.S. citizens, detention camps, family separations, and horrible civil and human rights violations. I'm done hanging my hopes on 240-year-old norms, boundaries, and standards for how our government operates. I'm done using them as the basis for my expectation of the right thing being done in the end. Trump and the GOP have shattered all of them these last 9 years. And now there are zero guardrails, no boundaries, no more norms. That's all fantasy now. The inmates are now running the prison, literally. I am expecting these next 4 years to be among the darkest, ugliest chapters in American history. That said, I'm a strong person. 18 years ago, I walked in a room and found my wife brutally murdered. I was left to raise a 2-year-old daughter. I got through that. I rebuilt my life, somehow managing to still appreciate life while finding joy and happiness again. That nightmarish experience didn't break me. It actually made me stronger. The dark days and despair that we're now experiencing won't break me either, and they will make me stronger as well. And I promise you, the darkness we're now facing will one day turn to light. We shall all see brighter days again. Oh shit. I guess optimistic Andy isn't gone yet. All right, let's get to the inimitable Rick Wilson. He is a renowned political strategist, infamous ad maker, writer, speaker, political commentator, podcaster, co-founder of the political action committee, The Lincoln Project, and a 2-time New York Times best-selling author. Rick, welcome back into the back room.
Hey, thanks so much for having me back, Andy.
So I'm going to take the liberty of speaking for half the country when I ask you this question. What the fuck happened last week?
Democrats didn't show up that we needed. That's the fact.
Mm-hmm.
Sadly, wish I could tell you another story here, but that's what happened. And we were unprepared as a country to watch and to pay attention that we needed to pay the attention we needed to pay to how Trump was turning out even lower propensity voters than before. And those lower propensity voters ended up making a decisive difference. They turned out low propensity Republicans, and the Democrats did not turn out their base, enough of it. We lost, there were about 15 million Democrats didn't show up last week. And I don't know if they didn't show up because they thought that the world was not, running their direction, or if they thought that there was some sort of lesson to be taught to Kamala Harris, or whatever the cause of it was. Here we are. We know at the Lincoln Project, we've gone back through our metrics, our numbers, and we did a pretty good job of persuading those soft Republican voters that we were good at persuading to do what we needed them to do. We were not in the business this year of trying to persuade the Democratic base, and somebody should have been doing that. And, there were a lot of woulda, coulda, shouldas now. We look back on it. They should have responded earlier to the trans stuff because it was hurting them with Hispanic and Black men at a level that they hesitated to admit to themselves, but it was. They should have been focused on rural Southern votes a little more than they were, because those folks really laid a hurting on them. And that is in part because in the rural South, the Trump folks realized that there were an awful lot of white men who are not high propensity voters who were not going to vote for a black woman. There's a lot of things, a lot of post hoc analysis going on here. None of it's pretty, and that's something we all have to face. But we try to always be very brutally honest about where the political field stands in our organization, and we believe that we as a country are in deep trouble, but that's no excuse to stop fighting in this battle, because if we stop fighting, he will win in the long haul.
You touched on this a second ago, and it is a hard pill to swallow, but the fact is white people chose a convicted felon rapist, white man, over an incredibly qualified black woman.
They sure did.
And, the pundits, everybody's suggesting everything, including the economy, crime, the border, immigration, trans kids in sports. But it really does feel like most of this has to have been due to sexism and racism.
I'm not going to say most of it, but it was a very meaningful factor.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very, very non-trivial element of this fight. Comes down to the fact that there were a lot of people in this country that, including a lot at the end of the day, and we're just into the tip of this iceberg right now, including a lot of African American men who weren't going to vote for a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I could give you a different answer. I wish there was another more comfortable answer to why this happened, but there's just really not.
It's an interesting question because we've had a black man as president for 8 years.
Yep.
And there's a part of me that's thinking, I think people are okay with that. The fact that she was a woman that cost her this election, perhaps
that's a really meaningful factor here. Mm-hmm. It really is. We can't pretend we can't pretend that is not in play in this election. We can't. It's a disservice to all of us if we say, oh well, we could just sort of like write that off. It was a factor that we should not and cannot ignore. And look, it's an ugly factor. It's a horrible factor. It's a stupid factor, but it's real. And you can't, the politics is a bias toward reality in the end. And if you're not facing it, you're not facing it. So I wish I could give you a different answer. I really do. I wish I had a better, more pleasant, more appealing thing that spoke better about America, but I don't.
Yeah, and we analyze that factor, and then we look at what young men did in this election, and we look at the Musk, the Rogan, crypto bro dudes, the kind of people who are like, I don't care if he grabs pussies because, quite honestly, I don't treat women that much better myself. Like, it just seems like we're moving further and further away from normalcy, and that glass ceiling, which now seems to be like bulletproof glass, right?
Daniel Patrick Moynihan once said of the country, sometimes we're defining deviancy down. Mm-hmm. And we have defined deviancy way, 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 way down in this country. The things that used to be disqualifying and anathema and absolutely, poison in politics are now like, okay. I mean, we literally have a guy who's been appointed to serve as the Attorney General of the United States of America, who in the very recent past was involved in a teenage sex scandal. I mean, you tell me how that works in this world as something that is now acceptable to Republicans, but it is. It's perfectly fine for them. They have no problem with it. And I think that we have, as a country, not fully processed the things that are broken and different and wrong about what our culture is now than what it was and what it should be. Because these people are a bunch of fucking degenerates, Andy.
Mm-hmm.
And it used to be that Republicans were like the ones like, oh no, we have to have integrity and moral standards and this and that. Not anymore. Not today. Those things are in the rearview mirror now.
Well, I want to get to the clown show cabinet appointments in a second, but you're such an astute, I'll even say brilliant strategist, and I want some insights from you in the post-mortem of things of this election before we move on from that. You know, there's a lot of criticism now being waged at Joe Biden, everything from he never should have run in 20 in the first place, he should have backed out a year ago and given Democrats a year and to have an open primary. Like, how much blame do you put on him?
Honestly, not that much in my head. I'll tell you. Look, Joe Biden was the one guy who in 2016 or in 2020 rather was super powered against Donald Trump. It was in all of our polling. We knew that if the race was going to end up being Bernie or Elizabeth Warren or whatever, we were absolutely going to get 4 more years of Donald Trump. That was never even a question in our work, in our survey work, and we knew it. We knew it. The real issue at this point is that you know, should he have left earlier? You know, I can't make that decision. I can't tell you what the right call would have been. Maybe yes, maybe no. I
should he have stayed in?
No, I don't think so. After the debate, I can tell you after that debate, it was over. I mean, there was no longer a viable path after the first debate. It just did not exist. And do I wish it was different? Yes. Do I admire Joe Biden? I do. I think he will be remembered as a consequential and good president. But that was not enough in this world. That was not enough. In this world, that was not sufficient. It was necessary, but not sufficient. And you know, a lot of people are dreading this. We're dreading another debate, rightly so. A lot of people were dreading whether or not, you know, Joe Biden was going to even survive into the middle part of the election. And for all Trump's evil, he has a certain crass and ugly vitality about him that his people really like and really appreciate and admire. And unfortunately, that was not going away. That was not going to rapidly be dismissed. So my belief in this is that a good president, a consequential president, but at the end of the day, it was just the physical burdens of the job had caught up with him, and it wasn't going to work out.
Mm-hmm. And what about Kamala Harris? I mean, it's hard to do a post-mortem on an election without, on some level, putting the candidate herself under a microscope. Where do you think she could have done things differently or better?
Look, I think she ran a very, very, very good campaign. This is something that I'm not gonna like join the chorus of Kamala haters. She ran a good campaign. I don't know a lot of ways she could have run a better campaign than what she did. Her campaign was well structured, coordinated. I don't think their advertising was quite where, you know, but I'm a fucking snob about that. And you know, I have my own beliefs about how advertising should be done and run. But I don't have a lot of critiques about her operational campaign, and certainly not about her presentation as a candidate. It was extraordinary. Again, everybody's got counterfactuals. Everybody's got woulda, coulda, shouldas. Everybody's got, you know, ideas about how they would have done it better. That's a universal standard or universal, you know, constant of all campaigns. Again, could you have done X or Y differently? Sure. Should she have gone on Joe Rogan? Yes. Should she have, you know, done certain things in a more timely manner in terms of you know, spending money to push back on the trans ads? Yes, all of that. But again, I don't fault her for the campaign. I fault the super PAC somewhat for not understanding that you can't moneyball your way through to victory in this world. You can't just run a campaign of you know, we're going to focus group every ad and we're going to test every ad and we're going to make sure that nothing offends anybody ever. That's not how this works.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I agree with you. I think she ran a pretty flawless campaign. But what about, as a strategist, okay, we now have the future ahead of us. We know it's going to be fucking butt-ass ugly, right? What does the party need to do? You touched on a couple of things which strikes a chord with me with regard to like the culture wars, all the things that make Democrats orgasmic, but also help cause elections to be lost. You know, my antenna first went up when defund the police came into the culture. Does the party need to get more centrist and just leave that kind of shit behind?
The country is further to the right than Democrats want to admit to themselves. I know that's hard to hear. I know as a former Republican, I'm going to get a lot of Democrats going, oh, shut up, you don't know anything. But people like me won a lot of races in places we shouldn't have won races. And winning those races was not by chance or coincidence or because of, or just because of racism. Winning those races was because we understood that about 2/3 of the country is not very woke. 2/3 of the country didn't hear, oh, they hate trans people. 2/3 of the country heard, I don't want my daughter to have to go up against a guy in gymnastics. I don't want my daughter to have to play basketball, high school basketball against a dude. Those things are not because America is hateful. Those things are because people are what they are. And the ideas that have possessed a lot of Democrats about equality and kindness and equity and all those things, they're not bad ideas, but the alternative to those ideas isn't hatred sometimes. It's discomfort or it's confusion. And I don't think people have weighed that, the political impact of that in the way that they should weigh it a lot of the time.
And what about the electorate itself? Are we at a new era where the standards that voters have has changed so radically that therefore the candidates that we put up need to be different, that, you know, maybe in the future, you know, a George Clooney or somebody like that isn't so far-fetched because the electorate is telling us we hate politicians. We want disruptors. We want people with no experience, whatever, yada, yada, yada. Like, does the party need to rethink the kind of candidates that it puts up?
Yeah, I think that stands to reason. I mean, I don't think there's anybody right now who wakes up and says, you know, what people are crying out for is more Elizabeth Warren. That's just not the way the world is right now. That is not how the field looks to people. That is not the desire of the electorate. It's just not where they're at anymore. And, you know, does that mean that anyone in elected office is disqualified now? No, of course not. But it might mean that we've got to really think hard about the types of candidates we're looking at and the types of people who we view as electable, because, you know, the world is different now. It is not the same place as it was 10 years ago, and certainly not the same place it was 20 years ago. This is not a world that looks the same anymore. It's not a world that looks like it's not a world that looks like, you know, even Barack Obama versus John McCain. It's much uglier. It's much more cynical. It's much more dirty. And we've got to accept that those things are real. That those things are real in this world now. The ugliness of politics is going to be with us. You're going to have to be ready to go in and fight dirty and ugly all the time. Nobody wants to hear that. I know no one in the world wants to say, oh man, I can't wait for nastier politics. But the nasty politics are upon us, and they're not going away.
Do you think we're heading to a place that makes it almost too far gone? I mean, we talked for how long about how Trump is an existential threat to democracy. We see what he's doing in a minute. We'll start talking about the cabinet appointments, but he literally is on a mission to dismantle our democracy. How dangerously close are we to that point where it's not going to matter anymore what we do or how much we fight?
Look, I'm not a guy who gives up. I mean, obviously people have figured that out about me now, that I'm a stubborn, you know, MFer. And not giving up is a big part of this equation right now. Not giving up on America is a big part of this, of succeeding. And right now there is a temptation to give up on America. I get it. It's ugly. I hate it. But there are people who feel like we're too far gone. I don't believe we're too far gone. I really don't. I believe that we're in trouble. I believe that the water is pretty damn deep right now. But I don't think we're too far gone. We're going to have to keep fighting this guy at every step, though. There aren't going to be any easy days ahead of us. There aren't going to be any moments where we go, oh wow, this is fun. What a glorious and easy time we're having. That's not going to be where the world goes in the next few years. We're going to have to wage some very painful political and social battles, because if we don't, the other guys will win. They will succeed.
Besides moving more to the center, what do you think the party needs to do in this fight?
I think the party needs to work very hard to figure out how to unfuck the image that it is only about identity politics. Mm-hmm. It's not, but the image is that it is. The social boundaries that are out there make it feel that way to a lot of people. And it's not going to be a quick and an easy fix. It's going to take a while to convince people that the Democrats mean something to working class Americans, that they mean something beyond the sort of, social warfare vibe and the sort of, and I think one of the things the party needs to do beyond the sort of cliche aspects of this, one thing they need to really work on and think through and come to grips with is they need to not seem like an academic coastal party full of elites. Mm-hmm. That has made it easy for Republicans to play a game of see what the rich elites want to do to you. They hate you. They have contempt for you. They're fancy. You're poor. They hate you. That is a really easy pitch for a lot of these people to buy into, and it makes their lives feel easier more explicable when you find somebody to hate. And man, they're good at finding people to hate. So that's something I think is really an important aspect here that we shouldn't underscore.
In the past, the expression was in the primaries, you move to the center, and then after you win, you go do your thing, right?
Right.
Looking at this election, it felt like the Democrats moved to the left and then said to voters, and if you elect us, we're going to move even further to the left. Am I exaggerating that at all?
I think that's a bit of an exaggeration. I think Kamala actually ran a fairly centrist campaign. Mm-hmm. I mean, it wasn't one of these sort of cliche, crazy, far left, extravagances. But
I'm not necessarily saying the candidate herself, but the candidate along with the party overall. Was that more of what voters took away from this?
I think that's probably right. I think there's probably a degree of that felt a little more, or felt a little less politically welcoming, but not much. I don't think it. Look, I really don't have a ton of harsh critiques about this campaign, for a simple reason. Nobody on the Harris campaign was out every day saying, we need to be more woke. We need to be more this or that. That wasn't where they were at. Mm-hmm. And that change in political attitudes, I think is valuable for Democrats. But they didn't quite get all the way there. Mm-hmm. They needed a further execution on those values.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's talk about Trump's casting of the new Lord of the Flies. Give me the best and the worst of Rick Wilson's analysis here of these people.
Well, look, I mean, these guys have a hard row to hoe going forward to convince Americans.
No pun intended, by the way, on the word hoe.
Yeah, no pun intended. to convince Americans that the normies are in charge, because this is a freak show. This is a full-on cuckoo town freak show, and the weirder aspects of Trumpism, are playing out at high speed and large scale. Stephen Miller and the deportation crew are going to have a field day, and a lot of Hispanics are about to discover what they bought, what they have invested in. They're about to discover that the country that they thought when they voted for Trump would only go after illegals is going to go after their families too. They are going to discover it's going to be a very harsh world in a very quick order, I believe. We're not going to have this smooth transition of just getting rid of the bad people. These guys believe that they're all bad people. And I just think it's something that a lot of Hispanic voters have undercounted in this country, and they have now officially fucked around, and they're going to find out.
Well, it's already like Arab Americans in Michigan are already having buyer's remorse because look at Trump's appointments. Who does he make ambassador to Israel? Somebody who says there's no such thing as a Palestinian.
Yeah, I mean that to me was one of those moments where you're just like, if you're a Palestinian American, you waking up right now going, oh fuck, what did we do?
Yep.
Here's what you did. Mm-hmm. You bought into, you wanted to punish Kamala Harris for not doing exactly what you wanted. So what you did instead was to produce a circumstance where she lost. Yeah, you got it. Okay, congrats, guys. She lost. Good job. But that loss is going to cost. It's going to come at the cost of a Middle East policy on the Trump administration that is a nightmare for those people. And I don't feel bad for them, honestly. I really have a hard time mustering any sense of like, oh well, that is really too bad. That's a real shame. They bought it. They knew what they were doing. They knew that they were investing in Donald Trump. And if you voted for Jill Stein, you were voting for Donald Trump. Let's all be clear. And that idea is so unbelievable as a conceit that you would vote for Donald Trump, or that you would support Donald Trump over Kamala Harris over an issue that, frankly, was not solvable by Kamala Harris in the short or long term, but they wanted to punish her. So it's kind of an astounding conceit, like I said.
So my last question is with regard to these appointments. I mean, it's almost senseless to analyze each and every one of them because they're so awful and not even to be taken seriously. The bigger question is, what's going to happen? Are we looking at what really is now going to be the constitutional crisis that everyone's warned about for years?
Well, yeah.
Where Congress, the Senate, Thune is going to have to decide, is he just going to like puncture his ball sack and take it up the ass from Trump? Or is this the moment of truth where he and his colleagues are going to have to stand up and defend this democracy that they took an oath to protect? Because that's where we're at, aren't we?
That is where we're at. That is the moment we have arrived at. Is this John Thune screw his courage to the proverbial sticking place and actually lead? Or does he say, well, we got to protect our caucus because, if Trump's mad at us, he won't be nice. And you know what? They take an oath to the country. I have no expectations that they will hold to that. Mm-hmm. I have no expectations of anything from any Republican member of Congress. Susan Collins will clutch her pearls and be very upset and
she'll
mutter
be pissed.
and it'll just be maybe someday they'll learn their lesson. Mm-hmm. But my long running accuracy about the moral failings of my former colleagues is an unbroken streak at this point. They do not and will not show courage. They can't. They're genetically broken inside in such a way that every time you expect them to do something better, you will be disappointed. 100%.
All right, I lied. I had one more question on this. And this is the only thing I'm hanging my hat on because I can't control anything else. Are they going to be, is this administration going to be so chock full of just losers and incompetence and swirling in chaos every day that they're just going to end up maybe doing nothing or half of what they hope, or just eating each other, and then hopefully 18 months from now the electorate could say, you know what, in the midterms we're putting the Democrats back in charge?
That's what we have to all focus on, is making the midterms a horrifying bloodbath for the Republicans politically. We have to break them in the midterms so that we take back the House, we take the Senate, and we start making Trumpism something that is a punishing ideological mistake. Once you do that, you change the game. Once you do that, you start changing the criteria of for victory. You start breaking off this idea that Trumpism is a cost-free political philosophy. And right now, it has been cost-free for the Republicans.
Rick, I always feel better when I talk to you.
Thank you, my friend.
Come back again soon.
I will do it. Thanks, Andy.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
And now it's time for another exciting episode of Just Jeff. Jeff, welcome back into the back room. What's your take on the insane events of the last 10 days?
Well, it's been a very difficult couple of weeks. First, my Yankees lost, and now Hammoud lost. And it's a difficult time. So, Jen, my dear, it's a good thing my family isn't prone to depression, right?
Yes.
I'm not.
Jen, is your dad correct on that, Jen? What's the depression quotient in your family?
Too many. too many. Mother and sister, but whatever. But that's all. My sister's only
that'd be his.
My sister's only half, because she was diagnosed in those days along the manic depressive, so she's only half depressed. The other half was manic. But in any case, no, I'm not depressed. I'm disappointed. I'm angry and whatever. But I will answer your question eventually if you give me half an hour. And
take all the time you need, Jeff.
Right? Yeah, I know you'll cut.
This is really the back room with Jeff.
So the thing is, I'm not depressed because when it comes to presidential elections, I lived through 1968, which was the worst year. I mean, maybe I hope this doesn't top it, but 1968, you had the assassination of Martin Luther King in April, and in June you had the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy, the real Robert F. Kennedy. But then you had the election of Richard Nixon, who at the time, and eventually a few years later, it was. I made a statement. I said, when he resigned in disgrace because he was going to be impeached, I said, I will never see a worse president in my lifetime. Well, I struck out.
Boy, were you wrong.
Yeah, I was really wrong. Okay, but anyway, about a week after the election of Nixon, something very positive happened. And that is, Jen was born. At that point, she was Jen Shear, but we don't have to go into that. So the thing is, even in the depths of despair, and I hope I live long enough to see Donald Trump's face taken off of Mount Rushmore, because I know he's going to put it on while he's president.
I like Mount Mushmore, actually.
So, so what was the question again? I forgot. What's my take on it? I think you got it.
I think we got your take on it, Jeff.
So, but I just want to say, I did hear your interview with Ron Reagan, which I thought was fantastic. I've been very impressed with him for a long time, especially because of his atheism. Now, and my wife and I were listening in the car. We had to stop like 10 minutes short, and I said to her, it's too bad Andy didn't ask him about him being an atheist, because he has this commercial where he talks about his being an atheist almost his whole life, and he's not afraid of burning in hell. And I wish Andy would have asked him how his family felt about that. And then I played the last 10 minutes, and what do you know?
What do you know? I'm not that much of a loser after all.
You did exactly what I had hoped for.
I'm glad you had faith in me, Jeff.
Yeah, the one thing is, and I understand why, because you're interviewing men, you have to have a certain decorum or degree of politeness, which Jeff doesn't always have.
Shocking. Well, we'll leave it on that
note.
Unexpected. All righty. Jeff, talk to you next time.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye, Dad.
This episode of The Back Room was edited and produced by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-edited and co-produced by Matty Rosenberg, and co-produced by Jen Hammoud. Our theme song was composed by Andrew Hollander, and our logo was designed by Cricket Lengyel. And special thanks to Patricia Wind. Please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, and also follow or subscribe. Until next time, keep your eyes on Washington, Hollywood, and your own backyards, and have a great week.